Hello, I'm Brent Bergherm, and thanks for joining me today. We're going to look at an exposure averaging scene that gives us a little bit more of a challenge. I've done some exposure averaging in the past where we just blend the exposures together and it's all good, but this time we're going to look at some movement in the foreground that we don't want to have coming through while still allowing those clouds to go ultra just smooth and silky and all that good stuff. So things that we could have looked at here, if I had used a neutral density filter, like a 10 stop or a 15 stop or something like that, I could have photographed the sky all in one shot, and it would have been pretty much the same thing that's going to result here today. Problems we have with that is the potential for buildup of noise and other other problems you have with long exposure like that. I would still have to have shot it twice and then blend the exposures together so that the foreground would not be just all completely blurry, because that's part of the deal here with this shot. So let's dive into Lightroom and see what we're talking about. So here we are in Lightroom, and you can see my scene here from Roxborough State Park in Denver, or the Denver area, I should say. It's just south of Denver by, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. And I've got this tree here and then some rock detail here. I'm at f16, so I have a fair amount of depth of field. And as I go through these, when I take a look and I'm flipping through these items, you can see that this tree pretty much just doesn't move at all, which is awesome. I want that to be nice and still. I do have some movements in the trees down here where the wind is blowing some things, and then all of a sudden we come to this one and it starts to move around a little bit. But the thing is, I still want to use these frames so I can maximize the silkiness of the clouds up here. And so when I'm flipping through this, it's like, oh man, look at all that stuff. So I'm going to try and keep it down a little bit. I'll try starting at that number 80 there. We'll go back here to 63. That's a total of 18 selected. So the reason I'm trying to keep it down is just for, how long it takes to process all this stuff. Because when I go edit in and I'm going to open as layers in Photoshop, it's going to open these in Photoshop all as a big layer stack. And this is just going to be a really big file. And if I were to go with all 30 that I shot, it's going to be over 5 gigs in size. And then I run up to my limit as a TIFF file. And I am still having Lightroom send over to Photoshop the full 16 bits of data in the Pro Photo color space. And I like to do that just as my normal working process. But when it comes to something like this, it might make sense for me to tone that down a little bit. But anyway, let's let this work, and we'll come back at it once it's all in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and we look back down here, we've got 3 gigs, so we're well within the limit for what we need for that TIFF file. We're going to be just fine there. Now let's start taking off these eyeballs and just kind of take a look here. We can see it opened up in order, of course, and we have just very, very subtle movements. Those are going to be okay, I think. It's when we get to this major movement is it this one? There it is. So this one is the first one. Actually, that's the last one. So this is the first one that has major movement in this foreground tree that I need to start worrying about and thinking about here. And so this whole process of what we're looking at doing is going to just give us the beautiful idea of a super long exposure. And so it's going to be blurry down here. It's going to be all blurry up here, but we want to take care of all this. So we're going to select all of these layers and just do shift select the layers, and then I do a convert to smart object. In order to do this technique, we just have to convert to smart object. So we've got our smart object now, and it's time to go ahead and do this process. So we're going to go to smart objects, it's layer smart objects, and then we're going to do this stack mode, and then we're going to do mean. Now for this type of process where we're looking to do this exposure averaging, mean or median is the one you want, but I usually like mean better, but median can give you some slightly different results that you might like better. I'm going to go with mean for this one. And so this is going to take a little while too. All these processes take some time. That conversion to the smart object took time, opening it up in Photoshop took time, doing this process here where we do the stack mode, this is going to take some time. We're dealing with tons of megabytes here. That is over 3 gigs of files actually. And so there's just so much data that it's processing. And as you do this for your images, I guess I just have to say, as long as you're patient, you can work through it. And as long as you have enough room on your scratch disk for Photoshop, you can work through it and you can get some really good results coming out. So here we have it. Look at the clouds. That is exactly what I had envisioned. Maybe a little more than what I had envisioned. I might want to tone that back just a little bit. So we'll look at that. But this area here, this is the problem area where that tree is no longer solid. You can see it's got some issues going on. So let's go solve that issue. And then we're also going to probably take a little bit out of the sky so it's not just quite as soft as it is now. So I double click on this and it's going to open up this smart object. Now, if you're not familiar with what a smart object is, it's all about Photoshop packaging up those layers of data and kind of putting them off to the side, and then you can do other things with them, like in this case, the stack mode. So it is a separate file, but it is embedded in your original Photoshop file. So just like when we dive back in here, we can see we still have all of our stacks of our layers here. We still have our 3 gigs coming down here, but we have this other thing, the file name .cr2.psb. That is the large file format that Photoshop uses, and then that is what is embedded. It's literally a part of the original file, but it treats it as a separate file. So when we're done with our work, we need to actually save it, and then it'll update what's going on out there in the regular file. All right, so we were down to about here. What I'm looking for is that transition, okay? So this is the first one, the first tree that starts to have the problem. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna use a layer mask. I'm gonna get back on my brush tool, and I'm just gonna punch that through so it's just no longer an issue. And so I've got about 3,300 pixels. It's a relatively hard edge brush, but a little bit of feathering on the edge, and then the opacity of 100 and a flow of 100, and then that allowed me to just punch that through, and then that will no longer be considered when it does its calculation for what we're looking at. So this is the last one that's good, and so we know that's a problem again. So I'm going, and so these are the same. So this one is good. This one's problematic. So I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to then click and drag, and you can see the double arrow happening on that cursor there. And then when I release the mouse and then I release my Option, it gives me a copy of the mask. And then let's just repeat that a couple of 3 times to make sure all those are taken out and not considered. Now, as I said, I had a little too much in the clouds. Let's go ahead and just take off, I don't know, 3 of them, and let's see how that works. Let's take these back on. And now I have to hit save, and then I'm going to be able to update this, because right now this isn't updated because this isn't saved. So let's go ahead and hit save and do that. All right, the smart object is saved, and when we hop back into here, we can see the difference, and this is definitely sharper. So it's just ignoring those areas that we blocked out with the mask, but it's transitioning perfectly fine to the regular part of the areas. And then as we look at what's going on in here with the clouds, it's a little less long of an exposure basically. If I wanted to go a little further along with that and just maybe take off, let's say 2 more of these items, so we just have 2 frames now where we have the thing that's just problematic. We have to save it again, so this will take a while. All right, so that smart object is being updated again from having just saved the smart object, and so it's painting the update again with that stack mode I got going on. But one thing I want to make sure we touch base on before we get too far, I've got these hidden. If in the end I determine I just don't want to use these, I'll absolutely delete them because it's still going to cause lots of megabytes to be used up. So right now we're at just over 3 gigs. If I get rid of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these layers, multiply that 5 by 172, that's how much each layer is, and I'm going to have a lot of savings of hard drive space and a lot of savings of processing and all that good stuff. So let's now see what we're looking at. All we did is we took out 2 more, I think it was, of these things in the clouds. So now let's take a look at the regular file with the stack mode processed. Oh, that looks really good. There's actually a little bit of texture coming through, whereas before it was just so smooth, and I didn't really care for it. But I really like this, and I was able to keep this nice and sharp. These got a little blurry too. If I wanted to sharpen these up, I could extend that mask into these areas too. And this is one of those areas where I actually kind of appreciate a little bit of more blurriness down here because it's all about eye flow. I want people to be sucked in with this item. It's really unique and looking good. And then all of this wonderful detail in the rocks and then the detail here. But I don't want people to get all sidetracked with all sorts of detail in these foreground elements. And I might even selectively blur these areas down here a little more. But as it is now, this is coming together really good. So as my end result I would do, I'm just going to go grab these and trash them. And then once they're trashed, that goes down to 2.21 gigs. I have to save it again because even though this only shows 171 megabytes, it doesn't tell us the truth. When I actually save this master file, it's still going to be that 3 gigs until I save this and get rid of that extra 800, 700 megabytes of data. And then it's going to show me the true 2 point whatever gigabytes only. And then I can save that, from being saved in the main file. And now, once that's all done, since it's the way I like it, I'm going to go ahead and close this Smart Object file. And so I just have my main file ready to go here. And I think I will go ahead and finish this off with a little bit of selective blurring and sharpening going on. And I'll go ahead and do that here in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just drag this down. I'm actually going to create a new copy of it, but I'm going to then go and rasterize this layer, and that gets rid of the fact that all of that stuff is going on with the stack mode and all that stuff, and it just becomes its own separate layer. And able to do that because I wanted to do this. I'm going to do filter, I'm going to do other, I'm going to do high pass, and I want to make a really small pixel count here because I want to focus on the granularity of the rock in the background and then also these items here. Now this is a sharpening effect, but bear with me. We're going to solve this up pretty quick here. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to just call this HP 1.5 so I remember what it is, and then this is going to be the positive side of it. So that means this is going to be the sharpening effect. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this to overlay or soft light. Either one will work fine. And let's take a look at what happens here. When I take that off, I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit more so we can actually see pixel for pixel detail what's going on here. And when I take this off, we can see it just a little bit, a little more sharp. That's it perfectly. It's just exactly what I wanted. And so that's going to be great. I love it. However, we do have everything is being sharpened, and I don't want everything to be sharpened. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a mask, and I'm going to get back on my brush, and now I'm going to go significantly smaller. But now I'm just going to paint in these areas that I don't want to be sharpened. And so those will then over here in the icon for the mask, it shows up as black. So that's exactly what we want. Probably put some over here as well. And I think I'll do this rock too. I don't want that to be sharpened because people might look at that, and if I don't sharpen it, then people won't look at it. Now what we're going to do, we're going to duplicate that. And I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit so I can name this. And I'm going to change this to minus so I know that this is a blurring effect. So here's the deal. Right now it's double sharpening. And if I were to take my Command I and invert this layer, it now becomes a blurring effect. Let me take off the sharpening layer and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to zoom back in. Here we are at 100%, the same general area. And so here it is without the blurring effect. Here it is with the blurring effect. Here it is canceled out because the sharpening and the blurring effect just cancel each other out perfectly. Here it is with sharpening. All right, so I want to blur all these areas and I want to keep sharp what I want sharp. So now I just have to invert the mask. And now the blurring is not happening where I don't want it to happen, and the sharpening is not happening where I don't want it to happen. And this becomes subtly more blurry down here, and this becomes subtly more sharp up here, and all of a sudden we're manipulating the eye flow and where people are looking in this image. And it's pretty much done. There we have it, and I think we're ready to go. So thank you so much for watching this process of taking multiple images, combining them together so we get not only a lot lower ISO because we're doing that exposure averaging, but the purpose really was to elongate that effective shutter speed so those clouds just look really awesome as we are just letting them streak across the sky. I got too much going on it, so I pulled it back a little bit, and then I also showed you how to take care of objects that move in the foreground. That was the biggest challenge here too. It's really easy to just do it and not worry about any objects that are moving. But here I said, I can't live with that because that's going to make that tree, that branch blurry. And so we just wanted to get rid of that part and go with just the parts that we wanted to be blurry to have that extra time coming through. If you haven't done so already, take a look at my 2 podcasts. I've got the Latitude Photography podcast, where we talk about all things related to travel and landscape or outdoor photography. And then there's the Master Photography podcast, where it's a good roundtable. There's 5 of us in the group, and we just have a great time each week talking about whether it's the latest tech, new techniques, learning about new things in photography. So we're all on the journey to master our photography. And then, of course, I've got a print course, Master Printing, and you can take a look at that. All the links are in the show notes down there, so take a look at those links. And until next time, happy shooting.